We often speak of awakening as if it were a sunrise, gentle, golden, serene. But the truth is far more haunting. Real awakening begins not with light, but with the slow unraveling of everything we thought we knew. It is the moment the veil lifts and the world we trusted, the one built on assumptions, borrowed beliefs, and comforting half-truths, begins to dissolve like fog at dusk. There's a strange nostalgia in that moment, as if we're remembering something ancient buried beneath the noise of modern life. The illusions we once called home, ideas of who we are, what we want, how the world works, start to slip through our fingers. And with every unraveling thread, we feel the quiet ache of a long-forgotten truth whispering through the silence. This is not a comfortable process. It is disorienting, like stepping into a dream that feels too real, or hearing a familiar song in a language you've never learned. Something stirs in us, something that has always known there was more. Not more to achieve, but more to remember. True awakening is not about learning something new. It is about remembering what we've always known but were taught to forget. It's about seeing with the eyes of the soul, not the ego. And when we do, the world doesn't become more certain. It becomes more mysterious. Every moment tinged with wonder. Every encounter layered with meaning. We do not ascend to enlightenment. We descend into our depths, peeling away illusions to find the raw, sacred truth that life was never what we thought, and neither were we. There's a part of us we seldom speak to, the part we locked away long ago, behind smiles and achievements and roles we've grown used to playing. This is the shadow, not evil, not monstrous, but ancient, an old companion we've long tried to forget. It lives in the echoes of shame we never voiced, the envy we buried, the pain we numbed with distraction. We believe we've outgrown it, evolved beyond it, but the shadow waits patiently in the quiet spaces of our lives, not to haunt us, but to be seen. For what we repress doesn't die. It lingers, shaping our choices, our fears, our attractions. We project it onto lovers, friends, and strangers, unaware that the parts we judge in them are the reflections of ourselves we haven't dared to face. And yet, within the shadow lies untapped power, a treasure buried in darkness. To face it is to reclaim fragments of our soul we once deemed unworthy. It's messy, yes, uncomfortable often, but also miraculous. Imagine finding a forgotten letter in an old drawer, written by your younger self, reminding you who you were before the world taught you to hide. That's what shadow work feels like. A remembering, a reconciliation. When we stop running from the darkness, we find that it holds not monsters, but messages. And in those messages, we rediscover parts of our creativity, passion, and truth. The shadow isn't here to destroy us. It's here to complete us, to remind us that wholeness is not found in light alone, but in the beautiful tension between light and dark, between who we show and who we hide. And in embracing it, we finally begin to walk not above the world, but through it, fully alive. The ego is clever, far more clever than we'd like to admit. When we begin our spiritual journey, we expect to leave the ego behind, to rise above its grasp. But what we often fail to see is that it doesn't leave, it simply changes costume. It trades vanity for virtue, ambition for ascension. And before we know it, the ego returns, cloaked in robes of light, whispering, "Look how far you've come." It congratulates us on our awakening, then quietly builds a throne from our insights. It doesn't fight the journey, it hijacks it. Suddenly, enlightenment becomes a title, not a transformation, a performance, not a process. The ego begins to say, "You are not like them. You are more aware, more evolved, more awakened." And just like that, we fall into the most seductive illusion of all, spiritual superiority. But the truth is simpler and more humbling. Awakening is not an elevation, it's a surrender. A quiet stepping down from the pedestal the ego builds. It's not about being above others. It's about seeing ourselves in them. The ego, afraid of its own death, clings to the idea of progress as a ladder. But the soul knows there is no ladder, only depth, only presence. Real spirituality doesn't announce itself. It moves in silence, behind the eyes, in how we listen, how we forgive, how we serve. It's not a performance, but a posture, a softening. And when we recognize the ego in its holy disguise, we don't shame it. We disarm it. We see it for what it is. A scared child trying to be important in a vast and sacred world. And in that seeing, something deeper wakes up. Not the ego's voice, but the soul's quiet remembering. There comes a moment on the spiritual path when all the light we've gathered begins to flicker and the warmth we once felt turns cold. This is the dark night of the soul, not a poetic metaphor, but a lived reality, raw and consuming. It arrives without warning, like twilight falling in the middle of day. Suddenly, the practices that once brought peace feel hollow. The truths we held dear dissolve like smoke. We feel lost, not just from the world, but from ourselves, from the divine, from the very essence we once knew. But here, in this aching silence, lies the sacred. The dark night is not a punishment. It is a passage, a hidden initiation. The soul, like a star, must collapse inward before it can shine anew. In this darkness, we are stripped of our spiritual armor. All the affirmations, rituals, and mantras fall silent. What's left is only us, bare, vulnerable, uncertain. And yet, it is in this vulnerable undoing that the seed of true transformation stirs. The dark night teaches what no doctrine can, that the soul grows not in certainty, but in surrender. It is a space where the ego dies, not in fire, but in silence. Like the chrysalis, tight and still, it holds the sacred tension before rebirth. And when the dawn does come, it doesn't arrive with fanfare. It comes softly like breath. With it, a new self is born, not stronger in the worldly sense, but softer, wiser, rooted in something timeless. Those who've passed through the dark night carry a different light, not one that blinds, but one that understands, one that knows the night and chooses to love anyway. Awakening, at its core, is not a grand becoming. It is a quiet remembering, a return. Beneath the layers of conditioning, achievement, trauma, and expectation, there's someone we used to be. Someone untouched. Not perfect, but whole. Not polished, but real. The spiritual journey does not ask us to become someone new. It invites us to remember who we were before the world began whispering who we should be. There's a certain ache in this kind of remembering, like stumbling across a childhood photograph and realizing the eyes in that image are still yours, just less guarded, more free. In the stillness of awakening, we feel echoes of that younger self, the one who marveled at trees, trusted without fear, cried without shame, and loved without needing a reason. But over time, we traded that rawness for roles. We became names, titles, opinions, personas. We wore masks not because we were deceitful, but because we were afraid of being too much or not enough. Awakening pulls at those masks, not to shame us, but to liberate us. It reminds us that who we truly are is not broken, not lost, just buried. This remembering doesn't happen in a flash. It comes in quiet moments, in tears that have no name, in sudden joy for no reason, in a sense of homecoming that floods the chest when all logic says it shouldn't. The truth is, your soul has always known the way. It has been waiting, watching, gently calling you back, not to some distant mountaintop, but to yourself, the one you were before the noise, before the proving, before the forgetting. And in that sacred remembering, you don't become more. You simply return to what was always there, the quiet, eternal light of who you truly are. We are taught to flee from pain, to silence it, numb it, outrun it. But pain, when seen through the eyes of awakening, is not a curse. It is a portal, a sacred doorway carved not by cruelty, but by invitation. It calls us inward, not to suffer endlessly, but to soften, to break open, to see. Beneath every ache lies a message. a buried truth that could not rise to the surface without the sharpness to pierce us. Grief reveals what we love. Fear shows us where we long to be free. Loneliness speaks of a forgotten self, waiting to be held. Pain is not here to punish, it is here to point. And though its language may be fierce, its intention is pure. In the quiet hours of anguish, something ancient begins to stir. A memory of wholeness that pain cannot erase, only uncover. The soul does not flinch at pain, it listens. Because it remembers, every wound is also a womb, and through its opening, something new is always being born. When we stop running and sit with our pain, even briefly, we enter a deeper realm, a place where healing is not forced but revealed. It's not about fixing the pain, it's about letting it speak. The irony is that what we try hardest to avoid often holds the very transformation we seek. Pain doesn't close us off, our resistance to it does. But when we walk through it with tenderness and presence, it becomes the fire that forges wisdom, compassion, and unshakable clarity. Not because it's pleasant, but because it's real. Pain strips away illusion and leaves only truth in its wake. And in that raw, honest space, we meet ourselves. Not the version we show the world, but the soul beneath the story. We often imagine awakening as a grand ascent, a climb towards some luminous mountaintop where we become more enlightened, more powerful, more serene. But the deeper truth is far more humbling. Real awakening doesn't elevate, it dissolves. It doesn't place us above others, it places us among them, tender and open, no longer needing to be special to feel sacred. The great paradox of awakening is that the more consciousness expands, the smaller we feel, not in worth, but in ego. We see ourselves not as chosen, but as connected, not as superior, but as part of something ancient and vast and beautifully indifferent to titles. The ego, always longing to be seen, secretly dreams of turning the spiritual path into a pedestal. It whispers, "You've arrived. You are beyond." But awakening says something else entirely. You are part of the whole. You are the wave, not the ocean. It humbles us in the most exquisite way, by showing us that divinity doesn't shine only in temples or texts, but in the eyes of strangers, in the hands of the broken, in the dust and ache of the everyday. In this soft surrender, comparison fades. Judgment falls away. There's no longer a need to prove or perform. You begin to walk through the world with quieter steps, speaking less, listening more. You see others not as lost or unawakened, but as travelers in their own unfolding, each carrying a hidden light behind the veils of their suffering. And perhaps that's the truest sign of awakening. Not a life free from shadow, but a heart wide enough to hold it. Not the rise of the self, but its return to simplicity, to humility, to the still, sacred truth that we were never above, we were always home. There is a strange magic in the people we meet, especially the ones who unsettle us, who stir something deep and inexplicable within. They're not accidents. They are mirrors, carriers of the reflections we have refused to see. In truth, our shadows rarely announce themselves directly. They arrive through others, through the person who irritates us without reason, the one whose confidence offends us, the one we cannot stop thinking about. These encounters are not random. They are invitations. Beneath every reaction lies a clue, a trace of ourselves we've buried, a wound left unspoken, a longing left unmet. Carl Jung called it projection, but it feels more like haunting. We are haunted not by ghosts, but by fragments of ourselves hiding in plain sight. What we resent in others often mirrors what we've disowned in ourselves. And what we idealize, we may have forgotten we carry. These emotional echoes are not meant to shame. They're meant to reveal. If we are willing to look inward instead of outward, these reflections become guides. They pull us back to ourselves. It's a humbling realization that the world around us is not just happening to us, but through us. Every encounter, every reaction becomes sacred data. The people we love, the people we loathe, they're all part of the soul's great mirror hall, gently showing us who we are. And so, the next time someone awakens a powerful emotion in you, pause. Don't rush to blame or cling. Instead, ask the question with reverence. What part of me is trying to be seen? For in that reflection, uncomfortable as it may be, lives the next step of your becoming. And when we learn to see others as mirrors, life itself becomes the greatest teacher. Disillusionment is not the end. It is the hidden threshold. It arrives like a silent storm, dismantling the scaffolding of certainty we once clung to. Beliefs we swore were unshakable begin to tremble. The truths we held close fall apart in our hands like dried petals. It feels like loss, like betrayal, like failure. But beneath that collapse, something far more sacred is unfolding. Disillusionment is not destruction, it is revelation. It tears away the borrowed stories, the inherited maps, the ideals that no longer fit. And in their place, it offers something far more precious, clarity. To be disillusioned is to be freed from illusion. It is a painful liberation, like the first breath after tearing off a mask we didn't realize we were wearing. In that rawness, we meet life without filters. We begin to see things as they are, not as we hoped, feared, or expected. And that seeing, though sharp, is real. It grounds us. It sobers us. It makes us honest. This is the quiet gift of disillusionment. It doesn't hand us new beliefs. It empties us so that something authentic can emerge. It clears the stage so the soul can finally speak, not in borrowed phrases, but in its own voice. The voice that says, now, let's begin again, not from who you thought you were, but from who you truly are. And so, when the ground falls out beneath you, when nothing makes sense anymore, don't rush to rebuild. Sit in the ruins. Listen to the silence. Trust that the falling away is sacred. For in that falling, you are not losing yourself. You are shedding what was never truly yours. And what remains is real. We long for clarity, for progress marked like milestones on a road. We imagine the spiritual path as a straight ascent, orderly, upward, complete. But the truth is far more mysterious. The journey of awakening is not linear. It is a spiral, winding and ancient, circling back again and again to places we thought we had left behind. Old wounds resurface. Familiar doubts reappear. And we wonder, haven't I already healed this? Didn't I move past this long ago? But each return is not a failure. It is a deeper descent into the same truth. Like rereading a beloved book and suddenly understanding a passage you missed the first time. What once confused now awakens something in you. This spiral is sacred. It honors the rhythm of the soul, slow, cyclical, ever-expanding. We are not meant to rush toward enlightenment, but to dance with it, to meet it in layers, in moments, in echoes. And as we spiral inward, we shed the need for final answers. We learn to live inside the questions. The destination becomes less important than the unfolding itself. Each loop of the spiral invites us to live more gently, more honestly, to return not because we failed, but because we're ready to feel more deeply, to understand more truthfully. And with every turn, we become less attached to being done and more devoted to simply being real. So if you find yourself back where you started, don't despair. You are not lost. You are spiraling inward, toward the center of your being, where all paths begin and end. In this sacred return, we discover that awakening was never a finish line, but a rhythm, a remembering, a quiet unfolding into the infinite depth of who we truly are. Awakening is not a single moment of light, but a sacred unfolding, a spiral journey through illusion, shadow, silence, and soul. Each step draws us deeper into remembrance of who we were before the world's noise, of truths buried beneath pain, of the mirrors others hold up to us. We are humbled, not exalted, broken open, not broken down. The path wins through darkness, reflection, disillusionment, and return, not to something new, but to something ancient within us. And in embracing both the light and the shadow, we begin to walk, not above life, but fully within it, awake, aware, and beautifully undone.